Pastor of the Outlet community, and tonight we are going to do something special. I've had an authentic conversation with one of our community members, Ericka McCracken, as we talked about the state of the church and specifically the state of the Black church in America. And so we're going to take a pause from our book study from the book of James, and tonight we're just going to have a conversation that I want to invite you to be a part of as well. Before we get into this conversation, I want you to do three things. Number one, go ahead, like, share, let everybody know that it's about to get real. We're about to get honest. We're going to be in the comment section interacting with you, answering any questions that you may have. Number two, let me know where you're watching tonight from. It always blesses us to know and to see where this broadcast is reaching. So God bless you from wherever you're tuning in from on today. And then finally, the question that we are beginning to answer is, why has there been a decline in church attendance? So why has there been a decline in church attendance? So what I want you to do on the third thing today is, from your point of view, from your experience, why is there a decline in church attendance? And I really want to hear from those who either may have one time gone to church, but now, well, physically we can't go, but prior to this, you said, I just gave up on church. I really want to know. One thing about me is that, I really want to listen. I really want to hear so that I can do my best with the opportunity and the resources that I have to be able to help out wherever I can. So tonight's question is, why has there been a decline in church attendance? Let us know beneath. We're going to go right into a conversation with Ericka and I. So I hope you enjoy this, and I'll talk to you once our conversation is done. So sit back, enjoy part one of why has there been a decline in church attendance.
Awesome. Hello, hello, hello. It is your friend here, Ericka McCracken, with my awesome pastor, Pastor Vincent Thomas Jr.
And you're gonna put the whole name in today.
I gave the whole government
all right,
name. Y'all need to find them. Well, we call him Pastor Vince. And last week we built the foundation. We were talking about the church, specifically the Black church and social justice. And this week we're going to put up the walls. We're going to put up the walls. Yeah. We laid the foundation, we laid the cement. So in putting up the walls, it made me think about why I started attending church and why we didn't attend church growing up. So I've been probably a regular church goer. What year is this? 2020? Maybe for the last 5 or 6 years. Okay. So relatively new. We grew up, we went to church for maybe a good year or two. And then my family dynamics kind of broke apart and dissipated. And then that stopped our church attendance. And I remember being a child, going to church as a family, me, my father, mother, sister, and then my parents separated. And then my mother, myself, and my sister started going to church or continued going to church. And it was just so awkward because I recall the pastor being like, yes, and the McCrackens. Pointing. Well, so happy to see y'all.
He would call y'all out in church?
In the church.
Oh, my. Okay.
And I can appreciate your pastor knowing you, but for me as a child, it just felt extremely awkward because one, we're missing somebody, and two, like, it's just hard to kind of get up and go and, recognizing that your family is different with all of those issues and concerns, and feeling like before the sermon started, he pointing you out. And then of course, everybody looks. So I remember being like, man, if this is what church is, I don't like to be called out in the church. So I think I carried that with me for a while. My mother, it became awkward for her. Well, I can't speak for her, but in my experience, I think it was awkward for her too, because a lot of the talk was like, I can't believe this happened. And so, so on and so forth by the church members and stuff. And you can appreciate the support, but nobody wants to hear about that every time they enter. You come here for healing, you come in here for whatever it is you need. And you don't want to be reminded of whatever you're going through. So for, I think my mother, it was a lot. And then we just stopped going. So, we prayed, we believed, but we didn't participate in, in a church setting until I became an adult. And I've realized I wanted my family to go to church. So I started going, here and there. And initially I went to church so far from my house that I only went for the sermon. Like I had cut out praise and worship too. I was like, I'm gonna get here when the sermon start, and
Okay.
I'm gonna leave before, or right when they do the altar call, because at the time
Okay.
the church was so big and it became such an issue to get in and out. I was like, let me hurry and get up. Let me get here when the crowd settled down. Let me get out of here. So
Got it.
as I matured, I realized, the sermon I think is kind of for you, but the praise and worship is for God. And it's really selfish, in my opinion, for me to just get here so I can get what I need and be like, peace. And then I wasn't involved because I live so far away. And I'm like, look, I'm driving here one time a week. I'm not coming back until
Oh,
next week. And then I recognized that I was one person in this large space because I didn't know anybody. And I didn't know anybody
wow.
because I only went when we were all supposed to be paying attention. Like there's no, I didn't go enough to intermingle and talk to people because of how I felt like I needed to go in and do all this other stuff. So a few years later, that's when I recognized, like, I don't want this to be just one other place that I go to every week just to get. I have the time to be able to give. So let me find a church close. And then I found a church that was a mile away. Like, you don't realize how many churches you pass going. Like the church had been there this whole time. And I don't know, I just knew someone at this other church and decided to go there, and it was about 30 miles
Yeah.
away. And that was my experience. And once I started going and being involved, it didn't feel like this big place anymore. It
Okay.
began to feel like a family. And I think that was important to me, because when we talk about mega churches, is you can have 10,000 people, but if you don't know anybody, it doesn't feel like a familial, it doesn't feel like an extra extension of you, or a place where you can go and really speak to whatever you're going through or give. It just feels like a big place that you go to every week. So.
Well, I really love hearing that because I actually come from the complete opposite
Mm-hmm.
of upbringing as it relates to church. So I think that our conversation today is going to be real juicy. So I grew up, I think I was born in church. When I could come out of the house 6 weeks after my birth was Easter, and my dad rented a limousine to take me to church on Easter. So my first experience, I would dare to say, outside the house was church. In '87, I was born on a Sunday. So all of these divine orchestrated events, probably as I'm talking to you, have led to what I call an inordinate love for the church, for gathering, for God's people. And so my whole life was not only in church, but everything about my life extended from the church. The church was
Mm-hmm.
my relational community center. It was, whether it was sports, whether it was friendships, whether it was, my first crush,
Mm-hmm.
all of that came from the exact church I was in. The church that I grew up in Michigan, also had a school. So I went to school at church. So if you can imagine, on midweek service days, I would go to school at 7:30. I would have
Ooh.
school till 3:30. We'd have practice for whatever sport I was in, because now my athletic life was at church, until
Mm-hmm.
6. I would get cleaned up, have dinner, and go to church from 6:30 to 9. And so
Whew.
you're talking to somebody who is born and raised and cut his teeth in the church setting. So I am going to
Wow.
love just our diversity of experience and
Mm-hmm.
diversity of thought. But what I love about this is, although we both started on the two polar opposite sides, when you and I talk, we have a lot of the same views,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is going to lead to the topic that we're discussing today.
Mm-hmm.
So I think let's go ahead and drop the question so we can have people to dialogue and interact with us.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, why do you believe there has been a decline in church
Mm-hmm.
attendance?
Yes.
Why has there been a decline in church attendance. Now, we know that's not every church. We're not talking about 100% of all churches. There are some churches
Mm-hmm.
who are piled on top of each other. Well, not now, but back when we could
Mm-hmm.
do that, they were piled on top of each other. But the majority of churches, they have seen a decline in attendance. I don't have the stats from the Barna Research Institute, but they've been observing, and it's not just Black church, although we're going to talk about the Black church experience. This is all
Mm-hmm.
church. All church attendance had originally in person had gone down. And quite honestly, if I'm being honest with you, as we're looking at what does it look like to gather in person again, I'm already
Mm-hmm.
anticipating that there could be some adjustments post the shelter in place to our
Mm-hmm.
in-person gatherings. But pre-COVID,
Mm-hmm.
what were some of the contributors to the decline in church attendance?
So if I were to answer that, I think I would say that people feel like they can have a relationship with God without it.
Mm,
So I'm thinking of people who I know because we had this conversation like a year or two ago, and
okay.
one, they didn't feel that the churches they attended, spoke to social justice issues. And two, of course, you get the whole money thing, that new building fund and so on and so forth. And I think people wanted or feel the desire to have like this relationship with God that's without walls and, you know, that. So those have been like my top three reasons why I think, well, from what I've heard. And I understand. Like for years, I knew I loved God, but I was like, I don't have to go to
Mhm.
church. And then when I saw people from church, I was like, well, um, this is interesting. Like they're acting like they go to
Elaborate,
church.
elaborate, elaborate.
I knew some girls in the day who was a little fast, and they were the ones in church all day, all night, every weekend, and they seemed kind of a little faster than me. And not to say
You
that I was a
know,
prototype.
I ain't gonna lie, church folks some freaks. I ain't gonna lie to you, church folk. And I ain't talking about young church folk. I'm talking to y'all old church folk. Y'all know y'all old church folks some freaks. Y'all, I grew up thinking that it's us. It's us young people with our hormones. We're coming out of puberty and we don't know what to do with all this. That was until I started talking. And not the middle-aged saints. I'm talking about the silver saints, the senior saints. So listen, don't be putting it on us like we the nasty ones out here. And y'all know I'm telling the truth. Don't you play with me. Don't you play.
I thankfully haven't heard anything, but I can believe that to be true. But the contradiction I have, in which I've told people, is like these people are everywhere, and I think I had this misconception that church is a place where people have gotten their lives all the way together. Like you got it all the
Mm.
way together, and they haven't, and none of us have, right? We all working in some area.
But we portray like we do across the stage. I'm talking. I'm gonna talk to you from the pastor side to the congregation.
Talk,
See, I
Pastor.
like this. I like this. So I'm gonna come from stage to congregation. You're gonna come from congregation to stage. Let's talk
That's
like this.
fair.
So
That's fair.
so it takes a strong person behind that desk to say I am a flawed human,
Mm-hmm.
because at the moment that we're speaking, all eyes on us. And that presents an opportunity for us to feel like we have to flex, or presents the opportunity for us to present the truth we want you to know about
Mm-hmm.
us, because
Mm-hmm.
very few people in my lifetime, and I'm glad that in these days I run with more leaders who think like this. Very few people are going to admit like I'm as busted as the rest, and God has graced me to
Mm-hmm.
do what I'm doing, but I need the same Jesus y'all need. Like
Right.
that
That's
that
fair.
was that was non-existent in my church
Mm-hmm.
experience prior
Mm-hmm.
to the outlet community. Non-existent.
Wow. With
It
all your time in church,
all
man.
my time in church, it was but stuff was busting up the whole time, but we were wondering how. And all the way down to, so I think about my teenage experience. You had volunteers who were down there, and they were perpetuating a standard of flawlessness as far as moral conduct.
Mm-hmm,
And,
mm-hmm.
you know, not only were we as teens supposed to have flawless moral conduct, but the volunteers were to have flawless moral conduct. And definitely the leadership was to have flawless moral conduct.
Mm-hmm.
Except that what happened was this element called humanity started showing up. And so we were having, and now I know the term is cognitive dissonance. We were having this cognitive dissonance, like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but, and then I thought that, and y'all said that in order for us to be, we had to be this perfect, and they not, but, you know, y'all still, and it's, and so, you know, and I don't feel so it was this standard of, I am never going to make it as a teen.
Oh.
And, you know, so
How
I
did
happen.
gosh, well, how did that influence you wanting, or maybe not wanting, because I feel like you're called to be a pastor, but how did you fight it for a while because you were like, man, I ain't never gonna measure up?
I felt like I wasn't a real pastor. I felt like I wasn't a real minister. I knew I had a desire to help people, but, you know, based off of how those before me portrayed themselves, I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I'll ever measure up, but I'm gonna just keep following my heart. So it always boiled back down to just what's in your heart. And all of us have this desire where
Mm-hmm.
when you're living out your created shape and form and purpose, you can try to run from it. So I tried to run from it. You could try to act like it doesn't exist, but it's going to find you and you'll end up living it out. So I was glad that these gifts inside of us, Romans chapter 11, I want to say verse 29, 11:29, the gifts and callings of God are without repentance. So we can run, but it's going to find you no matter what you try to do. But I said all that to say, we give this illusion of perfection. And it's hard for those listening to us to attain. So instead of trying to attain, they say, well, forget all that. Let me go do something else, because I'm clearly not called or cut out for this perfect group. Because everybody who is, you know, around those who are professing that are acting like they perfect too.
So, gosh. So what is your response to people who say, hey, I am free and I got a relationship and I'm spiritual and I don't really need church for that because it's just a bunch of other people who not perfect, proclaiming to be perfect, and I just don't have time for that no more?
You know, I talked about this on Sunday, especially the time that this is airing. I talked about this Sunday that COVID is an apocalypse, but COVID is not apocalyptic. What I
Okay.
mean by that, an apocalypse or apocalypsis, rather, that's the best word, is the Latin word for revelation. COVID has been a revelation, but COVID is not apocalyptic. This is not the end of the world, y'all. COVID has revealed all the lies we have told people from the beginning of churchdom, that in order to get a blessing, you need to be in the house. In order to have a real firm relationship, you need to be in the house. In order to get that touch from God, you need to be in the house. You can't get fed from your home. You can't get fed from your device. This internet is a fake means of delivery. It is artificial. You need to turn off your internet and you need to come in this house. And when you get in this house, then God's going to bless your life. Now, COVID has revealed that, in the words of Maury, that was a lie. It was a lie. Let me tell you, some of the most anointed times I have had in recent church have been when I have pulled up one of our services or another service on YouTube, Facebook, or our outlet campus, online campus, and I am in worship, and it is touching my heart as if I'm there. However, I will say this: we need community more than we need a church building. So the issues people have with church are not necessarily the building, but the community that they find themselves planted in. And so while I believe that we're going to see a decline of physical attendance in buildings, my prayer is that we can increase intentional points of connection for community.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of us have our tribe. And if you don't have a tribe, listen, we are here to help you find a tribe or a group of people to connect and belong to. All of us need that. So I think when people say, I don't need church, you're right. But you do need community.
Community.
You can't be isolated.
No, that's really good, because I found by not only attending church, because like I said, anybody can attend church and go and get what you need, but I also recognize that church, I'm trying to figure out the right way to say it, but I'm just going to say it. So church is a relationship. And sometimes, it's your time to receive everything in a relationship. Sometimes when you with your other person, your spouse, or significant other, or whatever you want to call him or her, like sometimes you are not the needy one, but you are the one who is getting a lot in the relationship. And sometimes you're the one who's given a lot in the relationship. And, this whole 50-50 thing, no, right? So legit, sometimes a relationship is 80-20, 90-10, 70-30. So I have also recognized that in my seasons of church, there were times in church where I was volunteering and giving, and I wasn't necessarily getting a lot maybe from the word or per se, but my role at that moment was to give, right? And I'll get what I need from wherever. And then there were times where I came there and I needed that word, and maybe I didn't have time to do all the other things, but I needed that. And I think people feel like, I'm going to church, but I'm not really just getting, what I need, so I'm gonna leave. And I'm like, well, no, you don't leave your partner or anybody else that you have a reporting relationship with because you're not getting what you need at that moment.
Right.
You recognize that if it's been 20 years, you just go in here, but you're not really getting fed and you're not growing, then absolutely. But I also think that people are so fickle, that we think the church is supposed to be this perfect place, but it's full of imperfect people. And sometimes you just there to serve. And I've been to a church before where I wasn't necessarily getting everything I needed spiritually, but I served, and I knew that in this moment I ain't supposed to leave. I'm supposed to serve. And whenever God says, you know what, your work here is done and you can move forward, then I felt peace and comfort. So I hope that, especially in a place like Atlanta, people understand it, because there's so many options. And with the more options you get, the worse it becomes, because you're thinking, I don't get this here, but I can get this here. But here you're not going to get this, what they gave you, and so on and so forth. So with every church that I pass on the way to work, on the way to the church that I go to, I hope that people can be committed somewhere, regardless of what you're getting from it. And hopefully continuing to give and continuing to have community. Because I promise you, if you go to a church and you really say, you know what, I want to get involved and give, that's a place you want to stay.
Right.
Because you're invested.
Right.
You are invested. And I think the issues with mega church is it's hard to be invested because you don't even know where to go. Like, you walk into this place and you gotta, it can be a lot. Like, I've been to a church once and I was like, oh my gosh, like, where do I go? Like, where do I start? So I hope that we recognize the need for community and not church. And we really plant ourselves and invest. And if you're not going to invest, don't stay with the church. Like, don't be like, well, this one, what did you bring? What did you give? What did you invest beside your tithe? Which is easy to do. So.
No, I want to, speak to what you said and kind of offer some alternate viewpoints as well. And, you actually, if we had to do the role reversal, you preached the 100% company line of all pastors. So I give you an A+ for what you just said. But as a pastor, I'm about to play the devil's advocate, which very seldom doesn't happen, because your reference point is from a place of maturity. It's from a place of, your season. You've been around the block and you come to understand and to learn some things. I do want to, if there are those who attend mega churches watching, we are not bashing mega churches. I do want to encourage mega churches to really begin to evaluate what on-roads do you have for community? What on-roads do you have for connection to the person that's coming in? I believe that the complexity of getting someone to belong is a little tougher the larger that you get. And working in mega churches prior to my experience with planting a brand new church, I understand that that is a real situation and you're not going to please everybody. So with that being said, I do believe, however, a church relationship should be mutually beneficial, that at times we both have to be consumers, and at other times we both have to be producers. And when we have a strong relationship, what we are able to do is we're able to end up giving what's needed at the moment. Let's just say from the congregation all the way to the actual leadership, the service, the volunteerism. That's what helps a church run. It can't possibly pay for every position that's needed to make it run. But on the other side, what church should do is church should speak to the relevant issues of the community base. And so it's important for us to understand not only what's going on in the places that we serve, but how can we leverage the resources and influence that we have in order to continue to service the places that we are. I really believe that the decline in attendance is coming from a position and a place of the days of do as I say, not as I do. And you all are to be here because you're doing this as unto God. And people are now, with the word, are becoming more introduced to the fact that, listen, I can serve God from my house. I can serve God in my community. I can give to my charities. But it's important for us to make sure that when you're becoming a part or you're finding a place to belong, that it is speaking to the plight of your life and the plight of your life's values. So, yeah, those are just some of the things that I like to share with others. Y'all, wasn't that real? Thank God for just an opportunity and a platform to be able to have some honest dialogue. And thank you so much for tuning in. We're looking forward to continuing these honest conversations. It's just in my heart to just be able to speak truth to power. And we want to make sure that when you come on to an Outlet Online experience, you're getting authentic truth. And so thank you all so much for tuning in. We can't wait to see you all on this upcoming Sunday. We are going to be having a virtual water baptism service. So if you want to be a part of that, go ahead and text water baptism to 770-667-4899. And what we'll do is we'll send you some information where you can be ready for the virtual water baptism service. I'll be on Zoom calling different households and leading them in baptizing their family members in their household. So it's an exciting time, and we are not letting the ability to not gather in person stop us from having church functions. So God bless you all. Have a wonderful, wonderful night, evening, day, wherever you are. Signing